Hey, welcome everyone to the very first episode of our show, Open Mind Lounge. Honestly, I was a bit confused about which topic to start with, but I chose one of the most important topics that I think is widely discussed and surrounded by a lot of mystery, which is ancient Egyptian history. Today's guest is a very dear and special guest, and you can really learn a lot from him. Honestly, I'm just going to ask the question and then sit back and listen with you all so we can enjoy his answer to our question today. My guest is engineer Tarek Shafie, a researcher in Egyptian history. Welcome, engineer.
Thank you, Dr. Baha, and thank you so much. You invited me to your channel and to your show. Thank you, and greetings to the viewers as well.
You're lighting up the place, really. Thank you, and hopefully we'll really benefit from your knowledge.
Thank you. Thank you, God willing. I hope it will be an entertaining episode and an important one for the viewers. Go ahead.
So we don't take too long. I'd like you to break it down simply for the viewers. When did Egyptian history begin? How did it reach us? What are the key milestones in ancient Egyptian history? So, could you give us an introduction to ancient Egyptian history? Because in our upcoming episodes, we'll dive into topics that are more mysterious, exciting, and intriguing.
Before we talk about ancient Egyptian history, we have to talk about the father of ancient Egyptian history. The great historian who wrote down Egyptian history for us and provided the only source that is considered the main reference for Egyptian history. The historian Manetho of Sebennytos. Manetho was from a city called Sebennytos, which still exists today. Yes, it's in the Zefta district, in Garbia Governorate, and the city still exists. He was the high priest. Yes, the temple in Sannat. Manetho lived around 2280 BC, during the reign of King Ptolemy II. King Ptolemy II. Yes. He commissioned him to write the history of ancient Egypt, and Manetho was fluent in the ancient Egyptian language in all its scripts. Yes. He was also fluent in all the ancient languages. Yes. Of the peoples surrounding Egypt. So he drew his sources from the primary Egyptian sources. Yes, the writings found on the walls of temples. Yes. Tombs. The papyri found in the libraries of the temples. Yes. So we can go down if he is. Yes. First-hand knowledge. It's not like someone just told him about it. Yes, unfortunately. Or before we say unfortunately, yes. Manetho wrote a book for us called the Book of Egypta. Yes, the Book of Egypta. It basically covers all the details of ancient Egyptian history. But unfortunately, this book was burned along with the Library of Alexandria in the fire of the Library of Alexandria in 47 BC. And nothing from this book has reached us. Absolutely nothing. But because this book was a primary reference for Egyptian history in its time, all the Greek historians who visited Egypt considered it a reference and would quote parts of it in their own writings. And that's what has reached us from the book. The writings or the parts that the Greek historians quoted from the Book of Egypta. Manetho says that recorded history began in the year 5500. But that doesn't mean there wasn't civilization in Egypt before that. There was, but we don't know much about it. From 5500 to 3200 BC. This period is called the pre-dynastic era or the prehistoric era. Why? Because in 3200 BC, the ancient Egyptians discovered writing. They discovered writing with its first script, which was hieroglyphic. So, the period before that is the era before written history. It's not the prehistoric era like cavemen. No, it's the era before written history. Everything we know from that period is oral history, not written records. Starting from 1300, writing and written sources appeared. Yes, so the ancient Egyptian began recording his daily life, his battles, his commercial activities, and his political activities. And we ended up with a huge wealth of writings and written sources about Egyptian history. Egyptian writing first appeared in its earliest form as hieroglyphics. So, hieroglyphics is not a language. Hieroglyphics is a script, just like Arabic can be written in Kufic, Ruqay, or Naskh scripts. We can't say the Naskh language or the Ruqay language. So, the hieroglyphic script is the oldest script of the ancient Egyptian language, and when we see it, we see insects, birds, animals, and scenes. Yes, the hieroglyphic script, or the ancient Egyptian language, also doesn't have an alphabet. It's a collection of signs. Thousands of signs, even tens of thousands of signs. Some of them represent a single sound, like for example, the falcon here stands for H. The owl stands for M. Snake C, T. A beetle stands for R. The ice stands for D, B. And some of them have several sounds. Like for example, here, aha, this is the lion. This is Pat. I mean in the foreground or view. Name chips. It means noble, or the scarab means keeper, which means sunrise. Or this view here. This is a person. It means beautiful or good or nice. Oh, this view here. This knot is called the knot of Isis. This, for example, means son or newborn. So these signs, some of them have two sounds, like this sign here, ka, which means double or counterpart. And some have 3 or 4 sounds. And some have only one sound. So we shouldn't say there's an alphabet in the ancient Egyptian language, because there isn't an alphabet. There are thousands of phonetic signs. The ancient Egyptian language was extremely precise. Yes, it has singular, dual, and plural forms. It has feminine and masculine forms. There are markers for the feminine and markers for the masculine. And it had a very special feature that doesn't exist in any other language throughout history. And that's something called the determinative. For example, when we write the name Mohammed, a foreigner wouldn't know if Mohammed is a man, a woman, a place, or a city. So the ancient Egyptian would write a determinative next to the name to indicate what it referred to. For example, here is a seated man. They would write this next to a masculine name to show that it's a man's name or a woman's name. So they would write something next to the name to show that it's a woman's name, like for example, Hatshepsut. They would write the figure of a woman next to it, so we know that Hatshepsut is a woman's name. Or a god, so they would write a symbol for a god next to the name of a deity. Not just that, the places also had their own specialties. For example, this particular symbol was written next to places in the mountains, the desert, or foreign cities. Oh, here this ceiling was dedicated. It meant, for example, morning, that this is the roof of a house, and that's clear here. Yes, morning or daytime, while the same house roof symbol, but with this mark, like thunder coming from the sky. That indicates nighttime. Bay. Yeah. Even verbs had their own determinatives. Any action done with the leg. Like running. He walks. Yeah. Or titin. They would put this determinative next to it, which is 2 legs. Anything related to the hand. Like hitting. Yeah. Like, yeah, handing over. Like to fight. They would use this determinative, a man holding a stick. Yeah. The I determinative means to see. Yeah, to look. Yeah, to perceive. And so on. There were several, determinatives. Yeah, thousands of determinatives to express the word. The determinatives are not pronounced, but they're important to clarify the word, confirm its meaning, and prevent any confusion in Egypt. The ancient Egyptian language was written in 4 scripts, the hieroglyphic script, which we've seen, and it includes animals, birds, and detailed shapes. And then, of course, this wasn't suitable for daily writing. The signs were abbreviated a bit in the hieroglyphic script, as you can see here. But even that wasn't simplified enough to write daily letters, divorce and marriage contracts, trade and purchase agreements. In other words, the everyday needs of ordinary people. So the demotic script emerged, which is just very, very, very simplified signs, and specialists who can read demotic are extremely rare. There are only a handful of them in the entire world. Because it's a very difficult script, as you can see, and it was written on papyrus sheets, on animal skins, and on broken pottery. But these writings were extremely important because they give us an idea about daily life during the time of the pharaohs. What did a marriage contract look like? What did a divorce contract look like? What did a commercial contract between them look like? How did they trade with each other? What did they sell? And what did they buy? There were also agreements made between families that were written down. So this is what gives us a real picture of daily life. And then, finally, there's the Coptic script. The Coptic script is the ancient Egyptian language written using ancient Greek letters. And this happened during the Greco-Roman period in Egypt. As you can see, it's still the same ancient Egyptian language. It's like how we sometimes write English using Arabic letters or Arabic using English letters. So the letters are ancient Greek, but the language and its pronunciation are exactly the same as ancient Egyptian. That's what they call the Coptic script. In the year 3200, something else very important happened in addition to the discovery of writing, and that was the unification of Egypt. King Menes unified Egypt, so instead of being two separate regions, north and south, he brought them together under one crown. Yes, we found this palette, which we call the Narmer palette. Mina is also known as Mina or Narmer. Yes, this palette is double-sided. It's one of the most important artifacts we found, because it's the announcement of the unification. On the first side, here is King Mina, who was the king of Upper Egypt, which is the southern region. The Sa'ides, meaning he's wearing the white crown of Upper Egypt and holding an enemy from the north, striking him with his battle mace in front of the god. Horus. Here, Horus is the symbol of the legitimate king and the god. Horus here is standing on the back of an enemy, and we can see his back here with the appearance of the lotus. Sorry, I mean the papyrus plant, and the papyrus plant is the symbol of the north. So this is an enemy from the north. And here, Horus is blessing the king's war against the north. Here we see something really interesting about the king. Here is the king's sandal bearer. Look, that's the king's sandal, and that's his servant carrying it. Even during the battle, he's holding the king's sandal and also carrying a water jug to give the king a drink. Here we see the king's name placed inside this scene, or in this rectangular shape, this square shape. This was before the invention or discovery of the cartouche, and the king's name, Narmer, is written here as Narmer, meaning the warrior, between the two faces of this cow. The cow here represents the goddess Hathor. So, once again, the goddess Hathor is blessing the king's name. And in the south, and at the bottom of the image, we see two of the enemies. Of course, this is a symbol of the enemy foot soldiers fleeing and escaping from the fortress. And this small figure here is a symbol of the fortress they're escaping from, and it's shown small like this. Which means they've run so far away that the fortress looks tiny from a distance, barely visible. So here, King Menes is describing the battle and proclaiming his victory over the north. We notice something strange here, or rather, something very important. Look at the details. This is a small tablet. The tablet measures about 60 centimeters by 40 centimeters. But look at the details of the carving here, the details of his knee and the muscles in his leg. This really shows a complete understanding of human anatomy. And here we're talking about the year 3200. That's why I told you that before 3200, what they call prehistory, it wasn't the era of cavemen or people living in the wild. No, there was a civilization, but we just call it prehistory, because we don't have any writing from before recorded history. But the details of the carving here, and the details of the muscles here, and the leg, all indicate that they had a complete understanding of human anatomy and human characteristics. The characteristics of the human body, the muscles, and the bones, in the other face of the palette. Here, it's an announcement of unity. And this is very important so we can see King Menes' perspective toward the northern region, which he invaded, took control of, and subdued its people. Here, King Menes represents the northern and southern regions as two animals or two lions, but their necks are very long and intertwined with each other, tied together. Here, the knot is a symbol of unity. If we notice, the two animals here are depicted in the same size and the same shape. This means that King Menes views the northern region he conquered as equal and equivalent to his own land, the southern region. He doesn't see it as a defeated or subjugated land. No, he sees that both are equal and equivalent to each other. And not just that. We can see here that this knot is being controlled by two men, one on the left and one on the right. These are the viziers, one appointed for the northern region and the other for the southern region. Each of these two viziers is pulling the lion's head away from the other at a single meeting point. This means that he is preventing conflict between the two lions. And the more they pull, the tighter the knot of unity becomes. So, each vizier controls his own region to strengthen the unity and prevent hostility or conflict between the two regions. Here, we see above. Here, King Menes is now wearing the red crown of Lower Egypt, which we saw earlier. In front of him are the standard bearers and those carrying what they call the totem, which are the symbols of the gods, flags, and symbols of the gods. Here, this is the symbol of Horus and Hathor, one after the other, and behind him is also the sandal bearer, the jar bearer, and in front of him are rows of slain enemies with their heads cut off and their heads placed between their legs. Here, Hathor is also still blessing the king's name, and in the south, at the very end.
Yeah.
At the bottom of the image, here we see King Menes depicted as a powerful bull destroying the northern fortress and trampling the enemy or the commander of the northern army. Here again is a symbol of the defeat of the north, the crushing of their forces, and the killing of their king. And this is the first declaration of unity in Egypt. After the declaration of unity, one of the greatest eras in the history of the Egyptian state begins, which is the era of the Old Kingdom, or the era of the pyramid builders, the builders of the Great Pyramids. This includes the dynasties from the first up to the sixth. So, the pyramid builders, we've seen the pyramids of Giza, but are the pyramids of Giza the beginning? Of course not. The very first pyramid was the step pyramid of Saqqara, which has 7 steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and there's a 7th one. Down here, it's destroyed, so we can't see it. This pyramid. Yes. The pyramid of King Djoser. Djoser was the head of the 3rd dynasty. Yes. The one who built the pyramid was the genius architect Imhotep. The great Imhotep. Imhotep, and this is a depiction of what Imhotep looked like. This is the statue that we found. Imhotep was the chief physician, the chief astronomer, and the chief mathematicians, as in those who do calculations. He was also the chief sculptor and the chief architect. He was basically a doctor, but engineering was his hobby, Imhotep. He was the first person in history to build with stone, so the building we're looking at here, the step pyramid of Saqqara and its associated funerary complex behind it. The structures around it, this is the very first complex ever built with stone in human history. Before that, people used to build with mud bricks, tree branches, and palm fronds or palm branches. Imhotep built, or rather, symbolically replicated, all the important buildings and structures from the old capital, Memphis. He only built the facades, so from the outside, it looks as if we're seeing those same structures from ancient Memphis. But those original structures were made of mud bricks, tree branches, and palm fronds. He built them out of stone around the pyramid. So here, the pyramid represents the king's palace, and all the important structures are built around it so that the king, in the afterlife, can visit the places he was used to visiting during his life and perform all the rituals he used to do in Memphis. Imhotep is the one who laid the foundations of ancient Egyptian architecture. So when we see a temple, even if we see it outside of Egypt, and we say, that's an Egyptian temple, why is that? Because it has distinct Egyptian architectural features. Imhotep is the one who established these features, which Egyptian architects adhered to for more than 3,000 years after that. Inside the step pyramid at Saqqara, we see the statue of King Djoser, and this was the first statue of a natural or human size that we see, what we call life-size. And it was also sculpted by Imhotep himself. Yes, this is a depiction of King Djoser's appearance. The interior of the step pyramid contains a very large and extremely complex network of corridors and chambers. In fact, it is the most complex pyramid on the inside, even more complex than the Great Pyramid. All the corridors were covered with this green or turquoise faience that you can see behind the statue. This is a panel taken from one of the corridors of the step pyramid. All the corridors were covered with panels like this one. So, this same panel was repeated throughout. This was also the first time we see green faience, or faience in general. Yes, this is the first time in human history that faience appears. And it's very clear that this was an Egyptian discovery or invention. By the way, they made it in this specific color to imitate turquoise. It was as if all the walls were covered in turquoise, and there was a very complex method for fixing it to the wall. Yes, I mean, there was no plaster in those days, so every faience tile, or every piece, had a hole in the back and was tied with leather straps to the wall behind it in a very complex way.